Introduction. So my name is Hans Navy. I manage the Cold Landfill program here at MPCA.
Record Office Assistant at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
Jimmy Francis, City of South St. Paul.
Cam Scotland, Area Technology.
Dave Magnuson, Waste Regulation Supervisor for Newport County.
Corey Reinhardt, retired resident.
David, Research Scientist at Minnesota Department of Health.
Caleb Johnson, Senior Environmental Program Manager at Washington County.
Nathan Wallerstedt, Project Management Branch Chief with the Army Corps of Engineers in St. Paul.
Sam Pass, Assistant General Manager at the Met Council.
Okay, and just checking to see if Melanie is online. We'll start with folk consultant introductions and folks in the back. You want to start us off?
Sure. Pam Anderson, Remediation Division Director.
Hi, Kara Van Limbergy with San Associates. Ashley Thompson, San Associates.
Corinne Strummel, MPCA.
Right, and members of the public in the room today. Like, introduce yourself.
Tom Diamond.
Kathy Smiles with Friends.
Ron Cockrell, neighborhood.
J.P. Baroni, visitor.
Hi, I'm Stephen Mickelson with MPCA in the closed landfill program.
Diane Reynolds from Clean Harbors.
Right. I know Narayan is online.
Yep, Narayan here with WSP.
Let's keep going. To advance the slide.
Sorry, we're just trying to make sure that everyone can see the slide.
That is,
Can we confirm with the folks online that we can see the PowerPoint?
You know what? I don't.
folks online confirm they can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, no.
No.
We're going to work on that. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide in my mind. So if we can advance,
Share my screen right then.
so let's take a minute.
Okay, now they can see it. Okay, now I'm going to go to advanced.
We're good.
Thank you for fixing that.
Okay, so then we need to go back to.
So we're through the welcome and introductions in advance. One more. All right, this is our plan for today. Through the welcome and introductions, I want to talk about the final report timeline and plan for the remaining meetings, which is actually only one meeting. Yeah, meeting in January. I will do an overview of task force, the comments that we got back. We'll take a break, come back, we'll do public comment and any remaining task force discussion, and that will be our time today. Okay? Great. Let's keep going. Final report timeline plan for remaining meetings. Next slide. All right, so high level overview of where we've been in the recent past and where we're going. August, we were talking about funding options and started to talk about restoration, remediation options, moving into recommendations. Since the October meeting, we sent you a draft report to review. We got comments back, some great comments back. And we're here today to go through the comments with a plan to finalize the report in January. So a little more detail about that slide. All right, so December 2nd task force meeting, we're here today. When we met last, we were thinking the plan for today would be to really go into areas where there were disagreement and comments. We were expecting we'd get comments back that conflicted, and we would have to discuss how to work that out. That didn't actually happen so much. There wasn't a whole lot of conflicting comments, but there are things to talk about today. So our plan is to have the discussion today. We'll make additional comments. We'll take all the comments we received and put them on one red line document. And then we'll send that out to you for additional review. To see all the comments that everyone made in the red line. Get another chance to look at that. The plan is to send you that draft on December 16th. And our hope is that we would receive comments back in by January 6th. And we'll have a very short turnaround time to get ready for the January 9th meeting. And we're hopeful at that time we can approve the power. Okay, so overview of task force comments. What we didn't see in the edits and comments that we got back were a lot of conflicting things. We also didn't see proposals to add new or delete existing funding recommendations. We're hopeful that when you got the draft, you saw that we did add one additional thing about state funding that we thought was captured in the discussion, but wasn't fully documented in the recommendation. So we did add that one. That's really the only thing that was added. But we did that before we sent it to you. We didn't see any proposals to add new substantial content. That's the things we didn't see. What we did see, I'd say 4 categories of edits and comments. One, first is really thankful for the people that did redlining. I would say in every case, we can accept the red lines that people made. In some cases, they were very small editorial things. In other places, people knew more about a particular subject area than we did. And they had suggestions that made the final product, we think, much better. And so we're really appreciative that people invested the time to make it. For a few of the paragraphs, some fairly substantial edits. That was helpful. We think we can accept all those. We also received comments back that didn't have red lines with them, and so we'll need to make the red lines. But for this category, we think we can do that without any more discussion. We know what to do. It's just a matter of making the edits. We want to show you a few examples of that today to make sure that you're also thinking, we don't need to talk about this. This is fairly straightforward. If it's not the case, we should talk about it. We want to spend most of the time today in the last category, comments where we would like to have some discussion before we did the redlining. That's what we saw. Any questions about that? All right, next slide. Well, I should just go back one. This is what we'll do. We're going to go when we get to the final. If there's a red line, we'll be accepting the red line. We're proposed specific language. They made edits. I think edits to address. Yeah. So where there's red lines, we'll accept the red lines. Where we need to make edits, in some cases we can do that. But like I just said, we want to talk about a few things before we make the edits for a collection of things. Hope this isn't getting confusing. All right, next slide. Okay, so for that first category, edits, we think we don't really need to talk about. We want to show you just a few examples, not all of them, but a few examples, and help you're thinking, yes, I agree. We don't need to talk a lot about this one. So some examples. The report sets a shared vision. So we got a comment back that said this report sets a shared vision and direction for moving forward, but it doesn't set a specific remediation plan. So yes, the technical details on remediation will be determined by the MPCA state remediation team. There were some proposed red line edits to clarify this. We think that's right. This is not, we can't take the task force report and go bid the project. There's a whole bunch of engineering work that needs to be done. This is high level concept, direction, vision stuff. So some edits to really reinforce that. We don't think we should talk about this. We can just make the edits. Okay. In the section of the report that is a summary of local and regional land use planning, there was a comment we should add information about the Mississippi River critical corridor, Mississippi River corridor critical area, and the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, which refer to the MRCCA chapter in St. Paul's 2040 Comprehensive Plan and the National Park Service MNRRA Comprehensive Management Plan. We can do that.
The only thing I'd note on there, work is currently going through the city's legislative process, which is the final adoption is shortly. So totally agree. making a general reference to the chapter or a reference to sort of, it is there and generally what it is. Totally makes sense. I just suggest not getting into any details in terms of the legend, right? It's not had final adoption way yet.
Okay, that's helpful. This is why we're asking. All right, let's keep going. In the remediation restoration options evaluated section, there's two things we just wanted to show you. Yes, a person who knows a lot about landfills pointed out that if you install a new cover, you need to think about gas. And a cover means you should look at a gas system. Otherwise, the gas will not have, it will accumulate under the cover and that will not work so well. Yes, that is true. So for the new cover only option, we're adding a gas system. I think because of the minus 50 plus 100, we don't need to change the construction cost, but we are going to update the operation and maintenance cost because I want to be operating and maintaining a landfill gas. There's also a comment to add more language about pyrolysis and gasification and how that, if these things actually happen, we don't think they're viable at the site, but just to note that there's air emissions and permitting that would be required. Really simple thing. I think we can just do that. Okay. All right, so those are the kinds of things that we think we can just address, and you'll see them all again in the final version with the red lines. These are the things we want to get more task force comment on. You'll see a lot of things pertain to the recommendations. Some of them are fairly small proposals to change the recommendations. We want to bring them before you to discuss, mostly because we worked on the recommendations together and we want to circle back and have a discussion. So for this recommendation talks about the Pigside dump holds a large volume of uncontained waste. But large volume because there is some uncertainty about what the volume actually is. So we were a little leery of putting a number. And also, we do have a number, we just don't feel great about it at the moment. So to put a number in here, we would go with 4.5 million cubic yards. And we certainly can do that. That would make sense. That's what we actually think it is today, but we also do some question marks. We're planning to add the 4.5 million.
So what gives you pause to put a number in there?
Yes, so it's a fairly, to get it's easy to see the acreage on the top. The depth is sometimes in question, and that will affect what the volume is. Yeah.
So if you put that 4.5 million and there's 10 million cubic yards, is that a problem? And that's why you paused to not say that number?
We wanted to be more sure. So we went with large volume. We knew that was absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah. To do the design work, we're going to have to get pretty sure about the volume. That's work that's ongoing.
Right. Yes.
Why don't you just say at least 4.5 million?
It's 4.5 million.
You do have estimated, and I think that helps people that don't understand just how big large is.
Yeah.
And so you've got to base there, the volume of waste is estimated to be approximately that. But that's just what it is. It's an estimate. But it gives you an idea of what volume you really talking.
I like having a number up there too. 'Cause like when we talk about the case studies in the report, there's numbers attached to how large those sites are, but help gives context.
Okay. Makes sense.
I would suggest that you say it estimate to be at least 4.5 million cubic yards. I don't know if anybody's ever dug a hole. But you dig a hole and you look at the pile next to the hole, the pile's way bigger than you fluff it out when you dig it. We don't know how fluffy this is. Some of it's topping wet.
Yep.
But just that way, if it is 8, because I've heard 8 when we first started, that you say, well, we said at least. This might be.
Okay, good comments. I think we know what to do here. Let's keep going. Okay, for the recommendation, this recommendation, excavating all the waste and sending it to existing metro area landfills would greatly impact the remaining waste capacity for the metro area. The dig and haul remediation option is implemented. The impact of metro area waste disposal capacity and impact of potential community revenues should be considered. As a proposal to actually make it studied rather than considered, a little more active, and that's really what we would do. we would need to dig into the details on it. So that's perhaps the more straightforward one. The second comment here is to separate these things into two bullets since they're two different issues. In addition to capacity in the metro-wide, there is a funding impacts to host communities as well. So there's a proposed edit, separate these into two separate recommendations.
I made that, guys. I thought when I was reading it, it's like, can you put two things that are related, but everything's related, and I thought it made it stronger to have them separate. To understand the capacity, you need to understand the community impacts, revenues. And so I thought it made it stronger to have them.
Okay, that's good to ask. Plan is to separate them. Okay. We have 10 left.
Be clear, when you say separate them, you mean sentences, not a separate.
Let's go back to it, take a look. Maybe, I think as it's proposed to add, there'd be two separate bullets.
I have the language. But I think we should-
It's a,
One's about capacity and one's about community revenue.
yeah, it's about the same thing though. It's about the landfill bill. And it's a level of detail. It just seems like it's one recommendation that builds off each other. Really, you wouldn't do two if not for one.
Pardon me?
You wouldn't do two if not for one. And so that's why I just wonder if the reader will understand the context. It's the reason is that excavating, sending it to someplace else is going to fill up all that. And then that will have implications not only for the Metro Waste ability to handle landfilling in the future, but also the cost to the local communities. I just worry if you split them up, a reader is not very familiar with this, and we all just go to the recommendations in most reports. They're not going to read the context of why the cost is important to those communities. I think it's more just to help tell the story, not disputing at all that the need to do two different things and that they're, that just I wonder what the readers.
If we wanted both there, but in one bullet, it could always start with if the dig and haul option is implemented, then excavating all the waste, et cetera, period. Additionally, the impact of potential community should be considered. So the additionally sort of makes it clear, but it's one bullet point because both are all under the dig and haul option. So it starts with that, predicated on that, and then it has both. And then picking above words, nothing, but it's one way I think to get both in there in one bullet, but separate them in the way.
I just, the reason that well, there's a lot of things that, because it's all about the dig and haul and the lining, dig and haul and that. Anyhow, so there's a lot of things in here that they all fit together. But in this particular case, I thought it was two different issues in many ways. Yes, if the dig and haul option is implemented, which would have an impact on the remaining waste capacity, there's a potential community revenues to be considered. So there's a way to put them in there because I just think that the way it's written right now, it looks like they're co-equal. They, doesn't, to me, didn't diluted both of them because they are separate issues. One is about capacity in the entire metro area, and the other is about community revenues, which is not. And so even the research that would have to be done is very different. One is about revenue, one is about capacity.
Yes. Melanie, you were talking about like one bullet, but a number one and a number two under the bullet.
Basically, yeah. Start with dig and haul. There's one bullet. So if you start with dig and haul option is implemented, and you have the first part and the second part. And it could
As
be
long
one
as
bullet.
there's a separation between them. I mean, it can be a bullet with two sub-bullets, however you want to do it. If the dig and haul option, I see what you're saying. So that's the title of it.
Yeah, and
And
I
there's
thought,
two sub-bullets.
sure, 2 sub-bullets, or I thought it could even be one with the word additionally, the impact of potential, because that separates them as well, and then one bullet.
Okay, this is good to hear where everyone is. We can make some edits, take a look at it when we send you the next red line. I think we'll be able to hit the target on this.
And I do think, again, looking at the way it's written right now, you have several things that say if the dig and haul or dig and line. So I would just, somehow I think they need to be differentiated so that the reader knows we're talking about revenue, and we're talking about capacity.
And I think we'll be able to do that. Let's keep going. These are red lines that we plan to accept. I want to show them to you. Future use of the site should provide for a safe and accessible natural area for passive recreation, such as walking trails, wildlife observation. This recommendation is consistent with Ramsey County Design Unit and the Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment approved by the Met Council in April 2021. To accept these red lines. Right. Next. Very good looking, sir.
Oh, no, just listening.
In the remediation restoration, in the recommendation section again, some red lines. So the recommendation, I'll go to the comment at the bottom. It recommends separating the metro plant and the environmental wood supply facility into 2 separate bullets because they're different, very different kinds of facilities. So this is what the red line would look like. We would separate these into 2 different bullets. First one talks about the metro plant. Second one talks about the wood recycling.
Get rid of that Andy project. Second one.
I don't see it.
Second line. Future expansion and, yeah, get rid of it.
Yeah, note the back.
Regarding the second bullet, I think we've heard pretty clear that the Metro plan has plans for expansion. I think the key with the Big Side Wood Recycling Center is around preservation, or I'm not aware of their plans for expansion. So I think it's just critical that it be described in terms of preserving the existing space. But I know we've also heard public comment that that use is already a concern at this site. So I don't want to further that concern by describing the goal as expansion of the wood recovery yard there, but preservation of what's already there. I think is an important part of the thing.
Do you feel like that's representative of what we had here, or should we be making some additional edits?
I think you could say should allow for ongoing operation. I don't know that you need the expansion in the second bullet point.
So delete the expansion, replace with the ongoing operation.
But they're having conversations
Yes,
about
they're
expanding to the north. So, and I think that, I do think that needs to be there since they're having.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I missed that expansion part.
Okay. We keep the red lines as they are. Or?
Go back, go back. Very last line. Ordinance. That's, you spell it that way, that's ammunition. You need the IORDIN.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, good catch.
I actually it was in the plan several times that way.
Okay.
No, it's just ordinance like that, ammunition.
Okay, good.
Needs
That's good. All right, we're gonna keep going.
Maybe there's some of that in there.
Well,
I didn't know what to say.
no, we're leaving that part out of the thing.
It's another recommendation to talk about. We should be completing a feasibility study of the remediation options and restoration options were presented and include possible impacts to existing nearby facilities. The feasibility study analysis should prioritize dig and haul, no backfill, and the dig and line remediation options. So this is probably the reviewer noted that this is the one time in the report we called out and we said dig and Hall, we actually added no backfill. In other places, we just said dig and haul. What I wanted to talk about today is I was hearing at a past meeting, we took the dig and haul with backfill off the table. So when we say dig and haul, it really implies dig and haul, there's no backfill. There's no longer a dig and haul backfill option.
Your more detailed description, that you did break it out later on in the report.
Should be consistent with every.
Be consistent. Yeah. Figure that out and make it consistent.
Honestly, it may be better to say dig and haul no back. We wouldn't necessarily think that's the case. I mean, we had it as separate option.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, to be explicit about it.
Yeah, I think it's better to be explicit.
Okay. We're in the funding recommendation section now. Two funding recommendation bullets. Voluntary public-private partnerships should be explored to fund remediation efforts. Private parties, including haulers, industries, and residents in the surrounding area who contributed waste to the facility would contribute funding. And the second bullet, the Superfund responsible party identification processes should not be utilized. Instead, fee should be assessed on all waste disposed. Cover contribute to remediation expenses since haulers, industries, and residents in the surrounding area all contributed waste. Comment is there's two different funding mechanisms here. One is a voluntary public-private partnership, and one is sort of mandatory regional waste fee. As written, the contributors such as haulers, industries, and residents could end up paying twice. The recommendation to clarify whether these are intended as separate options or complementary elements of a single funding strategy. A discussion about what we were thinking here. Getting into the details turn out to be important. This one.
Clarify is, I guess the second bullet point seems more like a remittance situation where it's the waste generators who are paying that fee, but through the mechanism of the waste collection bill. And the first bullet point seems to be the waste collectors or the haulers potentially paying a fee as well. So I guess I see these as separate funding streams.
I agree with the commenter that they're two separate things.
Yes.
In terms of separate or complementary, I mean, the idea is explore and see, right? You sort of explore and see, and one might work, part of one and a different version of another might work, right? So I don't know that I see them as totally separate or together in that respect, right? Look at both and see what works.
Get into a public-private partnership. I mean, who knows what that even look like, right? I mean, if anybody, you would think in the private sector that that's viable, right?
It could be explore assessed on all, on the second bullet point, right? Superfund responsible party identification should not be utilized. Instead, explore a fee assessed on all waste disposal to cover. That makes it more, I think, showing the intent of look at these as options.
You talk about a fee assessed. Who's at the table for that? I mean,
Would have to be something passed by before.
but when you talk about partnerships, those people who are doing this, we're talking about being haulers, but they wouldn't be at the table for that. We put them at the table with our recommendations
Same for the first or second.
for the first.
But
I mean-
assume if it's voluntary, they won't enter into it unless they're part of the discussion.
But again, I just want to bring up that the haulers that we're talking about to share those expenses with aren't at the table to tell us, to help us with that.
No, not now. I think the hard part with the public-private partnership is, the public or a private entity would need to find a way to generate revenue, right? Because they're in it to make money. Right? Presumably, it would be fee-based somehow. I don't know how that would work, necessarily, but I mean, it is an idea that could be explored. And then obviously the second one is more straightforward, right? In my mind, that's some legislation gets passed. Our dumpsters at the end of our driveway get more expensive every week, but per month.
You see them as two separate things.
And the first one is like, it's hard to know, Jimmy. I think like who's at the table and what they do. I mean, I don't know that we have a handle on that, or if even anybody would come forward with. They'd have to make money somehow.
I think that it'd be reversed. And honestly, you put explored the top one, but not the second one. If we're making a recommendation, I think that is the right answer, then we should leave it the way it is. It should be first. And therefore I would think you would have the super fund instead of to be assessed. And the second one then, starting with the voluntary public-private partnerships, could be because I don't think we're going to have much success there because it's so old and trying to figure it out. So could also be explored. Because if our real recommendation is the second one, that's what we should
Leave with that, make it stronger and make the other one as a possibility to look at.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't add the explore a fee assessed on for the super fund bullet point?
If our real recommendation is to, it's recommending that they assess a fee, then that's our recommendation. The other one, we're trying to say, well, there's a possibility there, but we don't know what that is. So that's where we need to explore what it is. And we wouldn't just put that one up. Second one, if we wanted to just put one recommendation up, we'd say assess it. The other one is more, we'd figure out how to bring those people to the table in a voluntary way. That would be great, but we don't.
And we got some good feedback on this one. Consensus is they're two separate things. We should lead with the one that is.
I have a quick question on that second one. Do we need to add a line stating that legislation would need to be passed for this, or is it as is fine? Curious to clarify that there would be a step needed for that to happen.
I think all of the recommendations, as they're going to the legislative, that they are recommendations to this legislation.
The county could choose to do it.
Mhm.
It's already, sure. The ability is already in place.
Yep, I just wanted to.
Just add on to the private parties that are included in considering public-private partnerships. It seems kind of narrow that it's only those who contributed waste to the facility. Is there a possibility there could be a private partnership who had nothing to do with this, but finds value in partnering on it? I think of the Chicago example I think we heard about, where that bike company had probably nothing to do with that remediation or the source of that waste, but found value in establishing that park. And so as it's written here, it's kind of narrow to those who had a hand in taking the waste. Maybe want to broaden that to parties who might find value that didn't have anything to do with it.
Good suggestion. Yeah, that is what happened at the Chicago site. They were focused mostly on the restoration side of it. All right, let's keep going. This is the recommendation we added. Just wanted to call it out here. We said state funding should be pursued, such as available funds from MILCAT account and opportunities to bond for cleanup work. Comment concern about calling out available funds in the MILCAT account primarily because it's not fully funded for existing landfill closures. There's a suggested edit. The state funding through newly created or existing options or accounts should be explored, such as opportunities to bond for cleanup work or use MILCAT account if additional funds from the big side down are added.
all for federal?
In a different bullet. Yeah, this is a bullet just focused on state.
Who made the edit there?
I did. They're struggling all the time, well, not Ramsey specifically, but the Melcat fund has been rated a few times and very difficult. So to say, we'll take something else out of that, I think it actually would be for the legislators that are working on this to say, well, if we have something we put in additional for Pig's Eye, that would be beneficial to Pig's Eye as well, as it would call it out. But to try to take money out of there when we don't have enough money in there anyway.
Makes sense, to me.
Okay. Specifically, the state law specifically says Melcat should be. And so does this, state law specifically says Melcat should be used for Pig's Eye. So if we say this, does that mean we can't use Melcat if additional funds are not added?
Such as opportunities to explore. I just wanted to call out that going to say that you're going to fund something, then you should fund it. And so it can be used for Pig's Eye, but I think additional funds should be added to it.
Seems
What you're trying to get at is add more funds and sort of earmark them for Pig's Eyes.
Okay, I see what, so the, yeah, with additional funds for the Pig's Eye, being added.
So even on the first, the existing, the top bullet point, such as available or additional funds in the Melcat account, would that do it? Because Kirk, your point, if Pig's Eye is already in state legislation for Melcat, like it's already identified for Melcat, I would be concerned with the additional, stating additional funds for Pig's Eye does seem to imply that the existing funds then shouldn't be used for Pig's Eye.
Yeah, a sentence that problem, MLCAP funding is currently very limited and adding additional.
Yes.
Consider.
So, okay, so that it's not just saying you have to add and use them just for that.
Yeah, the current funding
Need
is,
more money there.
current funding is insufficient, right? We really need to add additional funds.
Our other recommendation is to remember, there is one that says there is no funding source able to provide the need. So we do, that would build off the change that you're suggesting would build off of that concept. Sure. Okay, can I do this?
My whole point here is that I also changed the first part of it, saying through newly created or existing options or accounts should be explored, such as opportunities and Melcat, two that were listed in the original. But I think that the suggestions that I've heard are good ones, that more money needs to be put into milk, however you want to word it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, first of all, I didn't know the Pig's Eye dump was actually included in that. So that's my error. But it needs to be pointed out that there needs to be more funding, however you want to do that.
Does that account have a maximum that can be contributed, or is it just?
It just outlines the properties that can be done. So, or landfills into MSW waste that are not, the landfill program also included CD that are closed, Pig's Eye, and then the operating facilities if needed. It can be addressed at a financial assurance for those facilities.
Trying very hard to make sure that that doesn't. Financial assurance and inspections.
Good discussion. Make some edits. Send them in the red line. All right. The restoration funding recommendation. Restoration efforts pursue other federal and state sources of funding such as LCC, Marlis Arts, Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund, et cetera. Comments here, avoid ending the sentence with et cetera by adding a CWC fund to the list. CWC, the Clean Water Fund. There's a suggested edit for restoration such as LCC and Marlis Arts, Sam's Outdoor Heritage Funds, the Clean Water Fund, and other new or existing potential sources. This would be the new recommendation.
I made that recommendation, that edit. And by the way, the dot, dot, dot is the, yeah, okay. Figured you got that, but I do know that, I mean, the Clean Water Council, as I was on it at the time, was in support of having this task force put up. And there are some, possibly there's some thoughts there for restoration and clean water. That's part of what we're doing. So I just thought having more than just to have at least the three there, since they're all kind of connected, might not be a bad idea. But I also thought, or just, yeah, edit a report that has a sentence that ends with et cetera, doesn't go well for me.
Understand. Any other comments about this?
I don't remember, but was LCCMR defined elsewhere?
Yes.
You're gonna.
Getting to the end. One's a little bigger. So this is in the background section. It's related to the tables we had representing some of the data, sort of to paint a picture of the levels of contamination that were there. So in the tables, you are noticing there's data that shows what was at the site, and then we're comparing them to a health or environmental standard. So for this is about surface water, and we were comparing to criteria for pool 2. And we also said this one isn't exactly a right fit because this isn't exactly pool 2. This is Battle Creek and this is Pig's Eye Lake. It's connected to pool 2 hydrologically. DNR, for fish management purposes, DNR considers it part of pool 2. And also the details about the data and from pool 2 are from a small section of pool 2. So there's some contradictions here. I'll just go through it here. So we've developed site-specific water quality criteria for application in a portion of pool 2 of the Mississippi River. And that's true. As the basis for remediation and other efforts to reduce PFAS contamination. The water quality criteria address PFAS with the Minnesota Department of Health toxicological values and health-based guidance. So this is sort of the key. The pool 2 criteria is specific for pool 2 water bodies. And although not applicable to Battle Creek, the pool 2 criteria was utilized as a reference to provide context to detected PFAS concentration. We wanted to say this is in general context, but it doesn't exactly apply. Comment here is our site-specific criteria for Mississippi River miles 820 and 812 are based on scientific data analysis for that specific site. That's not all pool 2. It's just a part of pool 2. And so the criteria are not adopted for the whole pool 2 reach. These are values as general benchmarks. Using these values as general benchmarks could imply broader scientific representation or regulatory applicability than intended.
That was on my council comment. There's a lot. And it was a simple concern that there are very specific reasons to set a criteria in place, regulatory process that isn't the same as
what's going on upstream of the Battle Creek segment. And that, if that is misunderstood or conflates it to a broader application, who knows what that could do to the processes for.
With there's some language that says, we're trying not to do that. Maybe saying that doesn't quite, it's not enough.
I just think it's not really an issue. I mean, those things are true. It was really just to avoid potential confusion if somebody thought that criteria was meant to go beyond what it is currently. And it seems like the language takes care of that.
The language that we have there? Okay. You're okay with leaving what is there? You know, another chance at it too, obviously.
Yeah, I think for now, this is.
For now, okay.
Yeah.
Other discussion on this one?
To clarify, if I could say something, provide context to detected PFAS concentrations resulting from narrow that interpretation, is that, or was that hard?
Yeah, that's kind of the heart of the matter. It's hard to narrow it to anything. There's PFAS coming to the dump from the creek, in theory. It's in the groundwater. Where is it?
It's in the rain, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. So that's the main point, is that we know it's an issue in many ways, in many places that don't necessarily have a full regulatory model established to deal with it, or funding.
Suggestion. I see there's a note under the table, so the table that's associated with this.
Yes.
You have a note here that's saying for PFOA and PFOS pool to fast 2B water quality criteria we use for reference. So if you could maybe expand that statement to make clear that it's not a reference value, but not a regulatory. Not a regulatory criteria. Add a little bit more.
Expand the note on the table.
Yeah,
We can do that.
Okay, before we get to the appendix, I wanted to go back to the community revenues. I forgot, I wanted to ask a question. That was, my understanding was that the fees that are charged, and the fees that are charged, this waste could not charge those fees, is that correct?
We would be charged, I just don't know if the state would pay it.
Okay.
I mean, that would have to be part of it, right? Legislature paying to go to county and burn the fees, I don't know if they would.
Okay, and I don't want to get into a big discussion about it now, but I kind of wondered if there was something, and I would leave that up to you, because again, it's not a Ramsey County issue, but it is a metro issue. So, okay, I wanted to know, because I thought it's a matter of, if they're paid, then regardless of when it would be paid sooner, because it would be filled up faster, which is a bad thing. But I was just trying to figure it out for myself.
Okay.
I don't think you have to do anything to the report.
Great. Go back. Let's come back to this one. Let's do the next one first.
Have the break.
Okay, and then let's find the slide I'm missing in my last minute edit.
We're gonna pass on that one, Hans, so just go to this.
Passing that one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, this is our last one then, I think. Okay. So the comments we're going to consider adding another appendix to provide more technical information on the contaminants and other technical things related to the site. So Just reviewing this comment, this is sort of what the team is thinking. On one, this is important information to have some technical details to communicate the levels of contamination, the seriousness of the site. All that's important. One approach to that is you can see what we have. It's in the report. There's a sort of a summary, high-level summary of contaminant levels, all the media that's impacted, all those things. The other end of the spectrum here would be what would end up being a very substantial appendix that would have had probably multiple different technical reports to the document. There's also a middle ground place that says, there's a substantial amount of data and there's a robust project file, data collected over the last several decades. And that's where we refer the person to go to that, refer them to the file. So there's like three choices that we see here. One is just leave everything as it is. Say that what is in the document, all the summary that stands and that's adequate. Choice two, the other end of the field is no, there should be a whole appendix of the data. Everything should be there. The third thing is there's actually a file, rely on the project file, just reference the read to the project file. We want to talk about that. This would have significant volume depending on what the decision is.
Files easily accessible if you send people to it.
It's public information. We have a whole apparatus to facilitate file reviews.
So it would require asking for the file.
Not all of it. Some of it's available online. So we've got our apparatus to communicate information is the Minnesota Groundwater Contamination Atlas. Some things, what's in my neighborhood. But the real details to get everything, it is going to the file.
If we're going to refer people to somewhere, I don't want it to become a long and difficult process to actually get that information.
If that's the way it is, I think we're doing something wrong.
Here, if you want to drill down and take some of everything.
The big file, it's a very large file.
Right. I'm not inclined to add that much more as an appendix.
Okay.
Because of the size of it.
I think you did a good job summarizing that stuff in the report. And I think you go from a report that's this thick to a report that's this thick, right? And you start adding, or and I don't know where, when did you start adding that? Short of the very high level you've done, where do you stop? You don't want to be accused of leaving stuff out intentionally. So, I mean, you can't attach the whole file. So I think as challenging as it can be to find out if somebody really wants details, I know it's going to be work for you guys, but I still think that's the approach. Just say, ask for what you need. I love the summaries in here.
Most people are landing the middle ground here, just reference that there is a file with some substantial information.
This isn't about the appendix, and maybe it could be, I don't know. I had some health issues, and so I didn't get a chance to go through this as well as I should have. We have information in here, and I was just trying to go through really quickly here, that shows how much we had information provided to us that said how much do these different options cost, the range, and they were pretty big. Are they in here? Okay, thank you.
I think I know what we'll do with this one. We'll end in the middle, reference the file. Next slide. Right, we're at a 10-minute break time. So as the on-ramp on the break, we'll take a break. We'll come back at 10:10. And we'll do public comment starting at 10:10. And then following public comment, there's a task force discussion time. That'll be the end of our time. Public comment. Before we go into that, what does our online attendance look like?
We have quite a few people online.
So we'll do public comment in the room and also online. Let's go to the next slide here. Public comment, limit your share to 2 minutes. Start by sharing your name and your interest in the project. Start with public comment for those in the room.
I'm Kiki Sonnen with St. Paul Fruit Alliance and Exact Park Friends. And the question that I have is this river miles 820 to 812. What, we have a map of that?
Don't have a map of that at the moment.
And why was that portion of the tool chosen rather than 4 or 832? I think that's if that tool is.
I have the answer to that. So we need to look up why that data collection plan involved those river miles and not all of them too. I don't know the
It
answer.
seems to be north of the Waste Control Commission outfall. Trying to avoid that.
I'll follow up with you.
Another question that I had is on the website, you show a map of Exide dump sections in the ground, but it seems kind of small. And what happened with studying the pollutant levels and dealing with remediation on the fish hatchery section of the.
Hatchery is a separate site, a separate Superfund site in the Superfund program. It's moving through that process of investigation, and which leads to the remedy. It's a separate site.
Wasn't fish hatchery part of the legislation?
My understanding is no specific things.
I remember talking with State Senator Von Hurd. Wanted it in, and I don't know.
Other public comment.
Yes, Tom Diamond. Just picking up on that, I think that it would be valuable to identify the other polluted area. There's the part of the dump that's north of the railroad tracks. There's the area south of the area that's defined in this, that sludge was dumped. There's the ash pits, which aren't really pits. They're berms that were created with waste material from the plant. And not that that would necessarily be the starting point or not, but that these people are looking at the big picture of what they all have here. And the area north of the tracks may actually be the area which would be most prudent to do first, because otherwise you've got that you're cleaning up south of the tracks, and then you go and dig up the area north of the track. With that aside, I wanted to mention about the wood chipper site, and I am baffled that where the authority or the direction is determine that this task force to determine that the parkland there should be used for wood chipping. I don't think that's anything has anything to do with the directive that was given it by the legislature. And to tell you the background on that, it is prohibited to have that site there by the Met Council. Met Council policy does not allow that. It is not allowed by the city's regulations to be on that site. Our charter prohibits it. And there is no reason it has to be there other than that it would free land. It's parkland. We just use it for an industrial use. That's why it's there. And they can move it off at any time at the site. And so to call for it to remain as a use that's not allowed by our laws or by Met Council's regulations in parkland, I think is wrong and not appropriate in this case to get into that. I don't think that should be part of this discussion. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
None of the recommendations say that the local planning process is overturned or gets rid of that, or anything would still have to go through that process. So all those local plans would still have to be there. There's so this report is not at all undoing the requirements that if parkland were to be used for a different use that it would have to be replaced. That's still all in place. The dispute on whether it's rightfully there or that, the report doesn't take a position on that is one of those uses that could be allowed moving forward.
But what happens is it gains some weight by this task force. I'd serve on the district council in St. Paul has 17 district councils that advise the city on planning. So when we want to go to the city and say, hey, you know, you've been promising to get that off the site for years. Now it's time to do this while we're cleaning up the site. And they'll say, well, the task force said it should stay here. And so the people who actually live in the community are at a disadvantage because of the task force. We'll still argue it and fight for it, but I think it's inappropriate because that is not what the legislature asked this task force to do. Decide whether the wood chipper should be in the location.
I don't know, I don't want to go back and forth or whatever, because you make good points, but I thought my understanding is that our recommendation on anything that had to do with the chipper is the investigations of that property, because we haven't looked what's under there. So if we get into this, then that would be included in that. That's my thought on that. It's not saying we want the chipper there. We're saying that that's going to be part of this.
We're acknowledging that
We're acknowledging.
they're a neighbor
Yeah.
to this site, and we have to acknowledge that.
I think we did the same thing with the water treatment system.
I see what you mean.
Because this is about Pig's Eye dump. And how far out do you go? I mean, recognizing that they're there is important, and there has been talk of expansion in both of them. And clearly, they'd have to go through any legal requirements, ordinance process, everything. I mean, that's a given. Well, you can't do it without it. So, but that's this task force. My understanding of what we were supposed to do is deal with Pig's Eye dump and how do we remediate that.
Are you complete? All right, thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Kathy Seidel's Pig's Eye Park Friends walked in the park every Tuesday for years. Pig's Eye Park Friends on Facebook. So we're not the only one with this problem. And so I'd like to see some reference to working with other wave dumps throughout St. Paul that are still there, that still need to be cleaned up. PFAS is everywhere. You can't eat fish in Ramsey County except for 2 lakes, except for 1 meal a month if you're male 15 and over or an old lake. So looking at it in a bigger picture, we've also been paying extra to clean up other dumps in our trash fees, I understand. So that money's there, the 3M's settled to clean people's water of PFAS just east of here. We know a lot of this is coming from there. They'd settle again. We're figuring out how much it would cost and how much trash is there. Well, maybe half the people brought trash, and we meet people who brought bringing trash there for half the county. For it happens. So that's a fourth of the trash that we have now. Or maybe they took other dumps, so that's in need. And then spread that whatever our fee is, if we could sort and burn it like we do now, then that might give an indication that your fees for garbage would go up X amount. I think that would be useful for people or whatever number you come up with. So those are ways I think and other dumps I just read, there's a closed dump in Burnsville. There's trash underneath. They're going to put a recreation center on top of it. Residents are waiting to water people going, oh, wait a second. And so it's not just us that has the dump problem. What I didn't see in the report is it would be great if there was a map of some of the hot spots. Tom knows where they are. I wrote it up as we took our walk last Tuesday. oh, that hill, I call it Goose Hill where the geese come. That's where they moved the trash when they rerouted Battle Creek. Oh, yeah, where were the batteries? Oh, in a pile over there by the creek. And so there's also the previous public people group, MECC, took hundreds of pictures, and the Historical Society might get information about what trash is there from there. And there was a test of dye injection. There was nothing in the report about what that showed, just a big comment about we don't know how it's flowing or something. I can't remember for sure. There was groups on feedback summarized, which was great, but the Native Peoples group, it was said we contacted them. There was no feedback. I think if there was feedback, that should be there. Historical knowledge of the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District. Are they even in this group? This is Pig's Eye is part of their area. When I'm in their district farther north by Lake Salem, when I look at their reports, there's very little about this part, but there is some, including test results of what's coming in the 4 or 5 creeks. And when I read it, it was salt and dog poop from the dog parks, nitrogen. But it does come through the railroads, which there should be a map of public waters, because some are in railroad areas and they're doing a terrible job with the perimeters. There's just all kinds of their work just bleeds right into the public waters there, and it could be affecting this. And then there's a huge stormwater pipeline right through the middle of the park. It'd be nice to have information about that on the map. You think, well, just dig it all up, pile it up where there's that big pipeline, and who knows what other pipelines. And then lastly, it is in a floodplain. It's a St. Paul Park, so there is no loss of parkland. So if you pile it up in the park, given those two things, you have to have a flood wall. Somebody asked for a model of that, and there's nothing about that in the report, especially with the expensive gasification stuff that needs to be in there to keep it safe from gas buildup. And then you have the flood wall around it, so you can look at other areas along the river that do that. St. Paul Airport built a flood wall. Varian Island has a flood wall with a gate that still floods. So it's not just, oh, we'll build it up. Well, how can you still have hiking access? What if it floods? It's not just the trash flowing. And then we did see a flood, the 8th biggest, June before last, and it came like a third of the way into the park. And you could see that by the flattening of the plants and trash. And I don't think it's from the dump, from the river. It's up in the park too. It's probably other things. There was a whole line of it about a third of the way up to the park. And so I think people, this report needs a map to make that real, because the floods are going to get higher and not lower. It's going to be like southern Idaho, where I'm from. You got 4.5 inches of rain, not 2.5 in 50 years. Anyways, and the wood chipper is most of it's burned downtown. There's a map of the 2.5 whatever size particles that we breathe, and you can see it coming out of the stack downtown where it gets burned for district heating. And that's taking carbon that should stay in wood, it should stay local, it should stay in wood products, it should stay in dead log and wood chips, not burned in downtown St. Paul, where it doesn't get taken up by plants. Stored carbon again for 80 years. It's a lot of lobbying to consider that, not carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I am Ron Cockrell, neighbor. First of all, thank you for committing your months and years to this process. I started a file on this one 35 years ago. So there's a lot in place. A couple concerns I have is when I go back to the mandate in my mind is to deal with the Pig's Eye dump, and then deal with the dump is the pile, and then deal with the chemicals, which is the plume. For me, the pile and the plume. This report hits heavy on the pile. the options, you've explored options for it, what to do with the pile. We're really good at hiding it. I see pictures of the place, looks gorgeous. Pile's hidden, not a problem. Okay, the other issue is the plume. The plume that's coming towards my house, the pending plume that's gonna wipe out the drinking supply, affect the springs that I live near generationally. So we're concerned about the plume. The plume is what is the issue for litigation. We don't care about the pile. The pile we can hide. We got a plume coming down, all right? And when I look at the report, let's just say the adjacent property outreach, do we even talk about creeks that are coming into the site, everything north of the site, another Superfund site? It should be acknowledged in the report saying, by the way, we're really not done with the problem. If we can't look at the whole Big Eye Basin as a problem, and the science will tell you, it's one plume, one issue. We chop out the bottom half, we still got the creeks churning up the north dump, pouring it back into, we're not gonna be able to eat the fish. We're not gonna be able to swim in the place. We won't be able to walk on the property and enjoy it. We're not fixing the problem by ignoring it. Honestly, one sentence in here talks about, there's stuff coming down the creek. What's coming down the creek? We should know that. That's, if we're talking about the airport and they're concerned and the wood chip pile, concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the plume and the chemicals coming in. That's where the lawsuits will be. That all ended, okay? The pile is 2 million or whatever, it's 6 million cubic, give or take, depending on the fluff. Well, there's one north of it that is what, 600,000 cubic square feet. Can that pile be moved and put on top of maybe the new pile that you're going to make? So we can fix the whole problem, address the whole problem. We can't ignore it because when we hand it, I've done many of these things to the state where they picked up and looked at the issue and said, okay, thank you for resolving, focusing on it. But if we ignore the problem is it's a lot bigger than Pig's Eye 200 square or 200 acres. The problem is bigger through discovery. That's it right here. And if you can't deal with the second half of the mandate, then you failed. And you're failing the legislators, and you're failing the people who live here putting the money into it. So again, I appreciate the efforts on it, but it's a bigger problem than this report is telling me, and you're knocking off any reference to it when it comes to remediation efforts. And we're not even talking about let's approach everything that's coming into the site, as opposed to we're just going to fix the 200 sites and the groundwater. Well, there's more efforts that need to be addressed on the plume. The pile is fine. It's going to cost a lot to move it here. It's going to cost a lot more to move it there. We've got that part figured out, but the real health concern that the departments are here for is the plume and those chemicals. We get it. Let's get the stuff out of there, get it out of the water. Putting it into a vinyl tarp or whatever the material is postponing the problem, honestly. Again, thank you for everything that you've done. And it's a bigger problem than originally assigned. And through discovery, this group realized it's a bigger problem. Thank you.
So Hans, the feasibility study in that will look at certain things such as how to treat for groundwater and those items too. So we don't get into the details here of a pump and treat or those type of pieces, but that will be discussed through the feasibility study, which the recommendation says we need to do.
Yeah, those are all feasibility study needs. I think what the remediation team will be looking at is time. All these things you talk about, they're true, they are remediation needs. I think what the remediation team is working on is how does the timing fit together. So let's say we move forward right now with the groundwater study and said this sort of groundwater remedy is needed. And then it turns out we were actually able to take care of the waste. That taking care of the waste will definitely impact the groundwater. So there's a feasibility study needed for all these things, for the waste, for the groundwater, for the sediment, for the surface water. The trajectory we're on now is to see what can be done with the waste itself, because that will have a rippling effect on all the other media. It'll make the surface water better, which will enable cleanup of the sediments. It'll change what groundwater contamination is there. It will change what proper remedy looks like for the groundwater. So all these things, they're all needs. It's a massive feasibility study project. I think what will happen is we're on a trajectory to do it in pieces, starting with the waste, which is typically what is done in Superfund. Is if you can take care of the source, it's usually best to do that first. If you can't, then you need a different kind of project where you're pretty much saying the source is going to mostly be there. We need to work around it. It's not exactly clear which trajectory we're on. But all these things you're pointing out, they are definitely needs. It just comes down to time.
The very important concern from both of you talking about, it sounds like we are going to be addressing that through the feasibility study. If it's okay, maybe we can look and we can just call that out a little bit. I think we know what a feasibility study does, but if it's not there, we can talk about that a little bit more. And I know in our previous conversations, the idea of waste going from here to the fish hatchery is not feasible, but vice versa might be something we look at through the feasibility study. So you're right, this group has a very high level recommendations. A lot of the stuff you're talking about are still need to be done. Don't want to dispute that at all. The feasibility study will help with some of those things that are in the general surrounding, the groundwater, the sediment that we haven't really talked about the sediment, but we know that at the foot there, that sediment needs to be cleaned up. Those things will be addressed too.
This is a common theme for a really good public comment today. A lot of the comments that we're hearing are actually things that are coming next when we talked about the design work, feasibility study work, the detail. Get a follow-up comment, Jeff.
Yeah, just a question, but am I right that the report rejected anything other than taking it out and putting it somewhere else? I remember you summarize, people are burning it this way, people are sorting it that way, people are this and that. They were all rejected in this report. Just so people know. And I would try those things. I think because everybody throughout the state, throughout the world has this problem. And somebody has to help find one where we do figure out how to sort it, how to make it go away, whether it's the wet trash or regular trash. Yeah. But in this report, the recommendation is
Key task force recommendation is that feasibility studies needed, and the team that does that work should prioritize dig and haul and the dig and buy options. That's a key direction forward. Thanks for us. I want to make sure, I know this, I might get through everyone who has an initial comment, we can come back at the end. Any public comment in the room for folks who haven't spoke yet? Let's move to public comment. Any public comment for folks online?
So I think this chat is from there.
So if you're online, you want to make a comment, raising your hand is the way you would signal to us if you want to make a comment. Should be a button? Like to raise your hand. It's like no public comment, folks online. Okay, any final public comment before? Yes.
One thing I forgot to mention, and I think it's really important. I greatly appreciate your willingness to work in an open process, allowing people, the public, to have comments and such as this, and also the information, making it available, print information and stuff, and listen to us. We may not come to a complete agreement, but that's really not the point. Very open about the process. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Nobody mentioned another big part of land, which is that gets dumped there still, is the sewer and construction dirt in a pile. I'm estimating 4 times as big as this room area wise and 2 or 3 times high that it's supposed to go out of there. And trash underneath, trash not, but it's another problem along with the public wetlands, the creeks coming in, the wood chipping lot, northward, the peatlands around the lake, and all the great stuff that is like. But nobody mentioned that big pond. I understand. I go somewhere. The report doesn't mention it.
Wrapping up the public comment. Keep going. Last item on the agenda for today. Any task force discussion, things we haven't talked about. I know in past meetings, it's been helpful to go around the room and everyone share. And we can do that again if folks think it would be useful. Other things we should talk about today. It's the last one on the agenda, task force discussion.
I would just say that, from the get-go on this and getting this task force together, I mean, that was a lot of heavy lifting by our legislators and PCA stepped up to the plate and really tried to grapple with this. And one of my issues, when I was a Ramsey County Commissioner, I pushed really hard for this and worked with the legislators to make sure that it got passed because I know Tom has heard this many times. It's like it's been studied so often and nothing happens. And so I think I am proud of the work because it's a starting point and it's a way to get to the feasibility studies and all of the things that have to go into what's the real way to try to deal with this. And yes, it's the waste first because that does trip. That's not a right word to use here. It all impacts. It all starts there. And so I think that we've got something, once it's finalized and presented to the legislature, that they can actually implement. And that's, to me, probably the most important thing because how many times have they tried? And it gets to be, and I don't know exactly what happened because I wasn't part of it then, but I think that it was so big that they didn't have a direction in finding out what's there, all of these different things that are going to happen with the feasibility study. So I'm really hopeful that when this goes to the legislature, that they understand that there's a concrete way to try to deal with this. And it's going to take a long time. And it's going to be all these steps. And we've got to do all the background work in order to make it happen. Because just putting out two options doesn't do it. Nothing is that simple, I don't think. So I just am really proud of the work that we've done and what we have accomplished to get this thing. Get it done. It's my my mantra from the beginning of this. We've got to have something that they can actually work with.
Near the end, yeah, thank you.
The legislature earmarked $1 million for this task force, is that correct?
800,000.
800,000. And that can then be reflected in this annual report. That's where people can find out where those dollars were spent.
The source of that is actually the LCCMR documents.
Okay.
Yep, so we turn in two work plan updates a year that details where all the funds went.
So then this report, is that where people can find that through this annual report, or is that not in this report? So
Not specifically in that report.
Okay.
We could reference it on the ad, like we do the reports that folks are interested in more of the financial detail.
I think that would just in today's times to know where we've been and to know that, again, I, like you, I'm proud of the work that we've done and hopefully that the effort that we're all putting in of all these communities, all these entities is going to be impactful in moving forward the recommendation that legislature will take action on. Thank you for that.
Okay, we can look at that language is in the report and just make sure it's covered.
For reference to linked.
Task force discussion.
But kind of reflecting on the public comments we received, would it make sense to expand the contamination story section of the document to surrounding sources of contamination? Just not to be done, but it makes sense just to put a little bit of that context in there so folks don't come, folks have that knowledge.
Talking about a paragraph or section
Yeah.
that's about adjacent sources. Yeah. Look at it.
I just will reflect that this is quite an unprecedented situation that we're facing with this dump and what you've shared for best practices and examples from around the country and what we see within Minnesota with similar volumes of waste. There's nothing like this. And so there's not going to be a solution that is perfect in any situation, but it's going to take a coalition of parties coming together to influence the legislature with whatever the task force report looks like. It's not going to happen on its own. And so we don't want to see this gather dust on a shelf. And a lot of policy platforms for different lobbying organizations are already being set for the 2026 session. It may not timing work out to push this forward for that session ahead, but I recognize that as a state administrative agency, MPCA is potentially not in the position to be influencing the legislature outside of this report. So it behooves us, the people sitting at this table, people in the audience, to come together and find good and not let that perfection stand in the way of a good solution that needs to start moving forward. And I echo what Victoria says around the need to get moving on this. And there's a lot of competing priorities different groups have at the Capitol. And this should be a priority for everybody at this table, wherever it can be within the groups that we have influence at the Capitol at. So speak to that.
Other comments, other things to talk about today?
I just think you guys did a nice job of the report. Well done. Your comments was an easy report to comment. So I was appreciating
To hear that. Maybe a journey for today. Let's go to the next slide here. All right, so next meeting, again in person, this is meeting number 14, January 13th from 9 to noon. This time will be in the lower level conference room. All right. Thanks for coming here today. We are adjourned.